All right, welcome back, folks. Today I'm really excited. I wanted to start off with one of the works that I actually sort of hinted at in my intro video, which is the very first military science fiction piece. It's written in 1871 by G.K. Chesney. And Chesney's not a normal writer, which is one of the reasons why I think the piece is so good and so evocative. I came across the piece here in my copy of Michael Moorcock's Before Armageddon. Now, Michael Moorcock is one of my favorite writers. I loved his stuff. If you look at my shelves, you're going to see a ton of books there by Michael Moorcock. And we'll talk about Michael Moorcock stuff in future videos. We'll take a little review. We'll take a look at everything from Ulrich Stormsinger to some novels that he wrote that I thought are pretty good, that aren't normally on the radars of people who might normally be just used to reading epic fantasy and such. So G.K. Chesney is actually in this collection by Michael Moorcock. And I picked it up just because it had Michael Moorcock's name on it. This is a collection of stories that he wrote, all of which are British fantasy and science fiction stories before 1914, the beginning of World War I. He calls it Before Armageddon. Now, my copy of this book is extremely beat up, as you can see. And it's in the first story to this book that I encountered Chesney's wonderful story, The Battle of Dorking, which again is the first military science fiction story. And I loved it. It's just incredibly well written. Chesney is coming to this story from the mind not of a sort of a moralist or an ethicist or a religious angle, but instead just as a professional soldier. He had served in a number of wars, and he had come back to the UK, and like many others in his generation, he saw the UK during this era at the height of its power, at the height of its, and was the most powerful empire that had ever been. And yet there was a lot of materialism at home, a lot of jingoism at home, a lot of sort of internal struggles that were going on at home. And he sees this, and it resonates with him. And he sees, for him as a professional soldier, the answer isn't what others are proposing, which is social justice and socialism, and it's also not some spiritual regeneration. Instead, he is coming to this from the mind of a professional soldier. So it's military reform. That is, for him, sort of the key to helping get Britain back on track. For example, he'll talk about in the book, as well as in other places, that the UK's economy had become so specified on manufacturing and bringing products in from all of its numerous colonies that it was no longer making its own food, making its own stuff, and therefore, as a result, it would not be ill-equipped to survive the long term. So Chesney comes back from wars. He's pushing for military reform. He writes letters to people in Parliament. He tries to get people to change their mind. It's not working. So what does he do? Well, he decides to write and pen this novella, which is about 70 pages in my novel. So it took me about 75 to 90 minutes to read when I sat down and read it and committed to it. Which is not that long. So he writes this novella in order to hopefully capture the public's imagination. And wow, did he ever do that? We're going to take a look at how in a moment. But it's the first invasion story of this British invasion. And in fact, it's going to be so popular that it sold out multiple times in the first year or two and had multiple reprintings of it. But then also it created this sort of invasion genre literature in Britain. And you will see kind of one of the masters of that's going to be H.G. Wells, who's going to come in with his War of the Worlds. And in the War of the Worlds, it's going to read like Chesney. Or vice versa. If you were like me and you read H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds first, and then you read Chesney's The Battle of Dorking, like most of you probably will too, you're actually going to see that Chesney is very Wellsian. Although now that I know that Chesney came first by like 25 years, I'm going to call Wells Chesneyan. Anyway. But it's very influential. There's a large number of people that are going to come through and are going to write a lot of follow-up stories in this sort of genre. So the story itself is set in the future. Germany has developed technology which allows them to cross the ocean and get past London's wooden wall. All the various naval ships that they had to kind of create a mobile naval fortress at sea, and if you couldn't get through their navy, then you couldn't invade the land. That was kind of their sort of raison d'etre for surviving militarily. So as a result, if they can slip past that, and if that doesn't stop them, then they have the opportunity to kind of take the UK on in a much more fair manner. So these Prussian troops land. Now this is very much a big thing in the day when he writes this story. Napoleon's great French nation had just lost to the Prussians, which were a smaller, more nimble, and more competent force. And so this idea that a juggernaut that was previously thought undefeatable can be defeated was one that hopefully would resonate with Chesney's audience, just like it did him. And he actually talks about this for the first couple of pages of his book. He'll actually talk about how France should have been the example, we should have seen it, and so forth. He starts out in a very sort of Wellesian kind of a way, looking back at what was happening and so forth. I'm going to give you a couple of quotes from the first couple of pages to kind of show you what he's talking about and where it's coming from. Here's a line. What a proud and happy country this was 50 years ago. Here's another one from the second page. Fools that we were. We thought that all this wealth, all this prosperity were sent to us by Providence. And my favorite quote in here, and this is a line that I think definitely resonates with where Chesney's coming from. If you were to underline a key line in this, it's this. A nation that is too selfish to defend its liberty is ill-equipped to keep it. A nation that is too selfish to defend its liberty won't be keeping it. That to me is a very, very powerful line. And if you think I'm just not making up anything with this Wellesian kind of contrast, Wells goes over this at length in The War of the Worlds. This sort of, we thought we had it made. Here, I'll give you an example from the first paragraph in H.G. Wells's novel. With infinite complacency, men went to and fro over this globe about their little affairs, serene in their assurance of their empire. Their empire. And again, you can kind of see those two. Both of them are saying, wow, we thought we had it made. We thought that we were invincible. We thought that we were the big stuff. We were kidding ourselves. We had deluded ourselves. And there's this kind of core resonance with both Chesney and Wells that I think is very important if you're reading science fiction and such. The science fiction elements in Chesney's work are light because it's set in the near future in order to kind of resonate with his audience. A lot of time when people think of the genre of military science fiction, they think of, Starship Troopers or things, or David Drake and some such, where they're having these battles against aliens or bugs and other giant monsters and stuff. In this case, that's not the case. It's just set in the future, but with enough technology to enable the German ships to kind of slip through the sort of English defenses and land on the ocean. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that helps to really ground it and does exactly what Chesney wanted to do, to bring about this sort of conversation about military reform, which he sees as the way to helping to deal with the issues of the day, the jingoism, the materialism, the lack of sort of people in the empire kind of benefiting from the empire's wealth and so forth. So he sees military reform as the answer to that. And again, if you can't defend yourself and you're too selfish to do that, then you certainly don't get to keep your liberty. You can't be upset when it goes. And so again, this is a very resonant thing for Wells, and that Wells will pick up on, that he picks up on from Chesney. Now Chesney does have, in my opinion, some very important sort of visionary aspects to his war that he's going to describe. In the war itself, in the battles, it reads very much like a World War I sort of trench warfare kind of a concept with these armored vehicles and such. And it actually reads very much like it was written after World War I, which is very interesting because it's actually published in 1871. So if Chesney is not on your list of these sort of science fiction visionaries who predicted the future, like an H.G. Wells or Jules Verne, he should be, because from his military sort of understanding of the various battles he is in and so forth, he's coming to writing this invasion literature as a professional soldier. So he knows how soldiers would fight, how they can best defeat each other, and so forth. And he writes it in a way that is very different from Wells, very different from Verne, and so forth, but yet it's very resonant. He understands the future, and where things are going. As a result, I love the work. In fact, I've actually written about it. So my hope is that this work, again, will have hit one of your 3 sort of vectors for this, either that you have read it before, comment in the YouTube video comments below. I would love to talk about you more. If you've heard about it, maybe you live in the UK, you've heard about this story before, you've never read it. Again, it took me about 75 minutes to read. That's not that much. I'd be happy for you. I'd encourage you strongly to read it, and then happy to talk with you in the comments below. And then again, number 3, if like me, before reading that Moorcock story, if you've never heard of the Battle at Dorking, then take a look at it and take a read. And again, I hope that you really enjoyed that. After doing so, I'm going to link you to an article that I actually wrote on this topic for another site. That's one of the reasons why I want it to be my first sort of video where I'm actually doing a review of a work, because I've actually written on a review on the Battle of Dorking for pay for another site, and I'll actually have a link to that below. I'm actually going to link also to the first video, which mentions that we were going to be doing this science fiction video for the first military science fiction story, so you could get a chance to have that resonate with you and connect those things to dots. If you like this video, I would love it if you took some time out of your day to subscribe to it, and even if you don't, thanks so much for watching it, taking time out of your day. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you all have a good one. Thanks again.